Professor Dershowitz, welcome.
Thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So you wrote a piece today, because a lot of people are talking about the disproportionality of what Israel is doing in attacking Hamas in Gaza. You argue it is entirely proportionate. Why is it?
Well, you don't judge proportion by how many people are actually killed. That would be suggesting that the police should have as many people killed as murderers. The way you measure proportion is by the intention of those you're going after and by the risk it poses. And I gave as an example a rocket that hit an Israeli kindergarten the other day. There were 40-something kids in the kindergarten just an hour earlier, and the principal wisely had dismissed the school. Had he not dismissed the school, there had been 46 kids killed. And there have been 6,000 rockets. Each has the potential for killing 100 people. So we're talking about Hamas having tried to kill hundreds of thousands of Israelis. Israel responded, and it has killed hardly any civilians. And don't believe what you read in the newspapers. 400 people have been killed. According to even Hamas, 300 of them are Hamas murderers. They claim that 100 others are innocent civilians. That's total nonsense. How do they claim it? They say because they're children and women. Well, the children are 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds who are active terrorists, who are suicide bombers. For example, the son of the Hamas leader who was killed yesterday, and thankfully he was killed yesterday, he should have been killed a long time ago. He's a mass murderer. He sent his own son to be a suicide bomber. Now, his own son was a child, but you should have the right of self-defense against the 17-year-old. Others are women. Women are terrorists, too. Hamas probably recruits women, pregnant women, to be suicide bombers. So Israel is doing what every democracy would do, what the United States would do, what Great Britain would do, what France would do, what Russia has done. They're simply trying to defend their own civilians, and they're using proportionate means.
Alan, I know this troubles you because I know you're a Democrat and you're probably a self-described liberal, but I'm looking at this Rasmussen polling, and it really is kind of shocking that 62% of Republicans back Israel's decision to take military action, only half as many Democrats.
Well, the Democrats are wrong on this issue, and fortunately one of the Democrats who supports the action is a man named Barack Obama, who himself went to Sderot, where I had been a few months earlier. In fact, I had urged him to go to Sderot, and that's not the reason he went, obviously, but he went to Sderot, and he saw the rockets as I did, and he then announced that if his children were attacked in their beds at night by rockets, he would do everything in his power, and he surely expects Israel to do everything in its power. I mean, there are many extreme Democrats on the left who anything the United States does, anything Israel does, anything any Western democracy does is wrong. These are people who support Hamas. These are people who support Hezbollah. These are people, some of them, who support Al-Qaeda, like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein and others on the hard left, for whom no democracy can do anything right.
Well, that's what that's my point. I mean, Obama is being blamed by the left in this country for complicity in Israel's actions, and it appears that that the left is abandoning Israel, and it appears that Republicans are real stalwarts of Israel at this moment.
Well, I think Republicans are. They weren't always, by the way. During the Bush 1 administration, Baker was anti-Israel. There were a number of other Republicans. Pat Buchanan is virulently anti-Israel. And many centrist Democrats, Senator Kennedy, Senator Biden, have all been very strong supporters of Israel. But you're right. On the extreme left of the Democratic Party, by the way, many of these are not even really Democrats or liberals. They're extreme radicals. The hatred for Israel is passionate. I mean, these are people who couldn't care what's going on in Darfur. They don't care what went on in Rwanda. They supported the massacres in Cambodia. They don't care that, in fact, more Muslims and Arabs are killed every day by other Muslims and Arabs than by Israelis. They don't care about facts like that. They don't care that Israel acts in self-defense. They are so virulently anti-Israel and so virulently anti-American that I think their views should be discounted by most reasonable people, whether Democrat or Republican.
What's going on at the school you teach at? What's happening at Harvard?
Well, I think the vast majority of Harvard faculty and students are pro-Israel. We had a few anti-Israel people. Remember when Larry Summers said that he was against divestiture, as the current president is, against divestiture, singling out Israel. There was some on the faculty who strongly opposed Summers, and it was part of the reason he was kicked out. But I think the vast majority of students, certainly in the law school, the business school, the medical school, the future professional leaders of America, are supportive of Israel. That's true at Yale. That's true at Harvard. That's less true at Columbia, interestingly enough, and it's less true at Berkeley. And schools around the country are deeply divided on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, this must be very uncomfortable for you because I can't explain it. I mean, I understand your explanation that these are people who are far left and radicals and are anti-American, but I would find it pretty dismaying that this is essentially a part of the group that elected the new president, and they're already going to oppose him in his policy.
And I hope he'll stand up to them. He certainly appointed a Secretary of State who will stand up to them, Hillary Clinton, who was strongly supportive of American values and Israeli values. I think that's true of most of the people in his national security situation. But there will be some in the government who will be opposed, and this is a fight that has to be fought. It's dismaying to me as a liberal and as a civil libertarian, somebody who has devoted to supporting liberal values, to see some, the extremists, turn against Israel. But I think it should be dismaying to Republicans to see people like Pat Buchanan and Robert Novick and others on the extreme right who are as anti-Israel as anybody on the left is. So each side has their extremists. On the left, they're more vocal. On the right, they're probably more influential. I mean, Buchanan and Novick are probably more influential in government than people like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein, but Norman Finkelstein and Noam Chomsky know how to scream, whereas, Buchanan speaks softly but carries a big stick.